Hi, and welcome to my channel, Laura's Library Card. So this video is my October wrap-up. Let's dive right in. I finished 8 books in October, and I also had 1 book that I DNF'd. I had 5 of the books were on audio, and 1 book I read physically, and 2 of them I read digitally. I started off the month of October with the Love in the Night readathon, another round of it. It was great fun. I will put some links up in the cards and down in the descriptions for some of my content and some of my other host content. We have done this a number of times, and I just love every time we do it because we get to read a whole bunch of paranormal romance. So this time I finished 2 paranormal romances at the start of October. The first book that I finished was Lover Revealed. This is the 4th book in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, and the author is J.R. Ward. I listened to this on audio, and in this book we follow Butch and Marissa. These 2 we have seen in the previous other books. Their relationship has been hinted at and or kind of brewing to some extent, but yeah, Butch at the start of the book he's really troubled, he's frustrated. He and Marissa are sort of like a misconnection point. He is kidnapped and somewhat tortured, and also like sort of contaminated with this essence of the big bad evil guy, the Omega. So over the course of this book, he's trying to deal with that. He's trying to figure out how to keep his friends in the Brotherhood safe from him and from the Omega, but also as the book goes along, he's trying to figure out if he could like kind of use this to his benefit, because he is kind of has some abilities that the Brotherhood has never seen before. So for me, I like this. It was fun to come back to this world. I wish I hadn't taken quite such a long break between the 3rd book and this book, but it was fun to come back to this world and jump in with this group of guys. It's definitely like a lot of people kind of complain because it's all just trench coats and steel-toed boots and the Matrix-y, but I don't know, I kind of like that. It feels like a shtick. But I don't know, Marissa was pretty annoying to me throughout this book. She is very, is presented more so as like a submissive and passive character than compared to some of the other women that we've seen in the other books. I did feel like she got a little bit better by the end, but I just didn't really approve of her like reasons that led to the 3rd act drama. And so that was kind of my number 1 complaint about this book, was Marissa, and also kind of therefore the love and connection between Butch and Marissa was frustrating to me, because I just didn't feel like they'd had enough interactions in previous books to warrant it being love. And sort of the same thing for this book. They are together and they're like, no, we shouldn't be together because Butch is contaminated, but they're like, but I love you so much. And I'm like, but why? You guys have had like no interactions. It just felt too insta love for me. There was also an element of this book that I thought was very interesting, which is Butch's relationship to Vicious. It was very intriguing because it was like almost like a love level of relationship. I mean, they kind of even have a conversation at one point where Butch is kind of admitting, he says, you know, if things were a little bit different, aka I think the subtext there is, if I was gay, we'd be together. But Vicious is not gay. Butch is not gay. I don't know. Vicious might be bisexual. I don't know. But it was just this really kind of confusing but like intriguing element, the connection between these 2. So I'm hoping that we get to see some more of that throughout the rest of the series, if and when I pick it up, just because I feel like Vicious and Butch have been set up in this book to balance each other out as their roles in the Brotherhood. But I thought it was a very interesting sort of friendship level, more than friendship, confusingness that was happening. I thought it was fun to read. So that was the first book I finished in the month and for the Love in the Night readathon. And the second book I finished for the Love in the Night readathon was Don't Hex and Drive. This is by Juliette Cress, and it is the 2nd book in the Stay a Spell series. In this one, we return to the same witchy family, the witchy set of sisters. This time we're following Isadora. She's a little bit more soft and sort of a homebody type character compared to our main character from the first book. I enjoyed that element. She also has an affinity for healing and emotional magic and plants. So I thought that was kind of an interesting character to portray. She's not quite a hippie, but like she's definitely a homebody and less outspoken and less brash, so I appreciated that. And then, but for me, the real star of the show was the main male love interest, which is the vampire Devraj. He is of Indian descent, I believe, and he is just this charming, handsome, show-stealing kind of character who just sweeps in, and I loved his points of view. They were like lusty but still respectful, and he was really appreciative of Isadora's good qualities, and he could really see her and admire her for who she seemed to be. Over the course of this book, they work together on kind of solving this mystery that's happening around the city, but also there are a bunch of tropes packed into this book. There's opposites attract, only one night, let's, bang it out and be done. I really enjoyed the writing style. Again, I feel like Juliette Cross has this very easygoing but friendly writing style that is steamy and fun and includes the tension and good description, but isn't too purple. And I just really enjoy her writing style, and I'm loving the second installment in this series. And like I said, it was steamy, and so I enjoyed it. I felt like, similar to the first one, as soon as all of the action is done, there's a very quick wrap up at the end. I was a little, like, the only points that I docked from this book was how I felt like it was kind of a bit cheesy and slightly out of character for the actual final pages of resolution. But overall, I really enjoyed the book and can't wait to continue reading in this series. The next book that I finished in October was actually a book that I read with a book club I'm in real life, and that was the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This is a horror slash thriller book, which I am not, that's not my wheelhouse, but I actually really enjoyed this book. I actually found it quite thrilling, which is not something that's been my biggest complaint when I've read other like mysteries or suspense or thrillers previously, is I have frequently felt that you're supposed to be thrilled and I'm not feeling it. Whereas in this book, I guess the thrilling parts were the horror elements, and I definitely feel that Hendrix plays on inherent human fears. There are some gross scenes that are all involving like rats and roaches and bugs, and inherently playing on and setting up the scene to be like gross, as well as something inherently I think that a lot of people are already afraid of. So I felt like those elements were like really like made me squeamish, but also like kept me on the edge of my seat. So that was kind of different and interesting. The premise of this book is that we follow Patricia as our main character, and she and a number of her friends are all housewives. It's this, suburbia in North Carolina, South Carolina, in the South. And her friends all read true crime books and get together monthly, but everyone is sort of stay-at-home moms. It's set in the right of the late 80s, early 90s, and over the course of this book, there is a new guy in town, and he, quickly establishes himself to be this upstanding citizen that most of the community respects him, and especially the men are really just like, oh, James, he's a good old boy. But Patricia learns that he is a vampire, and he is preying on especially the local Black community of young children, but a number of other young children. And she is gaslit so hard, the patriarchy just slams her down. And there's also some like weird event in the middle of the book that didn't really make any sense to me, that I'll just kind of, it's a content warning for attempted suicide. I'll just go ahead and say that, but I didn't understand why that element was in the book, so that part was kind of weird. But there is a lot of condescension happening in this book on the part of the men, looking down on the women and not believing her and gaslighting all of the women, but especially Patricia, because that's the point of view we see. And there's like a weird time jump in the middle of the book, but ultimately in the end, the whole bunch of these, suburban housewives have to get together and take down this vampire. And I think that the point was that Hendrix was trying to insert a lot of sort of commentary on race and class and, patriarchy, but I wish there was a little bit more there. I guess sort of that's the point, is it's supposed to spark discussion, and there were a number of interesting discussions in my book club, but I actually just really felt pulled along by this book. I felt like there was also a couple of loopholes. If you look at it from very like narrative structure, from an actual analysis of the writing, I think there were some issues there, some plot holes. I didn't understand the whole point of like Slick and what happened with her. There's a content warning for rape also, and so there was like a couple of things that I just didn't think that the book narratively made sense. But throughout the whole book, it was extremely readable, very fast paced. I was pulled right along and thrilled and horrified and squeaked out and also like enraged multiple times, and I think that that's sort of the point. So I thoroughly enjoyed this book and definitely want to check out more by Grady Hendrix. So a little bit of a change of pace from paranormal and spooky stuff. I then read Cress, which is the third book in the Lunar Chronicles series. This is by Marissa Meyer. I've been reading this series for the first time, and I fell woefully behind in the read along, but I am actually kind of enjoying this series. So in this book, we follow some of the characters who have already been established in the previous two, but everyone is all split up. So we are following Cress and Thorn and the desert and their pathway, and this is a Rapunzel inspired retelling where Cress is Rapunzel and Thorn is her love interest. But then we also are following Scarlet, who is on Luna, and sort of what she is going through. That is sort of the least pages of point of view that we get in this book, but we know that that is happening. And then we also are following Cinder as she and her team, who are managed to be together, are trying to figure out where to go from here and have an intention to start the revolution. And what they're going to do is they're going to try to stop the wedding of Kai to the queen of Luna. And so that's their plan, and then they're trying to execute said plan. So for me, this book series has just been very fun. It is a young adult sort of romantic fantasy series, or basically YA sci-fi fantasy, YA sci-fi with romance elements. I don't know, but I am liking it. I have to remind myself sometimes that they are sort of dumb teenagers, and that's why some poor decisions are being made. But overall, I just really enjoy the readability. I like the connection. I think it's fun, and yes, it is kind of predictable, but I do feel that Cinder as a character is improving, both her abilities and her reasoning about morality and her plans to kind of grow into herself. And she feels that, I think that honestly, learning about who she is and what her, trying to choose what her future is holding, I think will help, and already is helping to improve her character, and she is going through some growth. So I am intrigued where this is going to go, and we already know a little bit about it's going to go. I think we're going to see a big chunk of action happening on Luna, so I'm excited for that. The book that I DNF'd this month was called Cherry Cheesecake Murder. This is by Joanne Fluke. I listened to the audiobook and got about 90 pages in, and I just was not for me. I don't like cozy mysteries. I don't like cozy mysteries that have anything to do with food, and that's what this did. It felt misogynistic. It felt religious. Just in those 90 pages, I read a whole bunch of Goodreads reviews that said it was crap, so I said, no, fine, I'm out. Nope, I'm not doing it. And it was fine. So I didn't. I stopped. I DNF'd. DNFing is good. Good for my soul. The next book that I read was Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. I read this. This was my physical book of the month, and I read this for a book club that is a really great group of ladies. And I kind of wish I'd gotten the audio on this, because the main character of Donis and the setting of this book is not on a reservation, but near Native American land that is their land historically and is their current protected lands. And Donis is part Native American, part white. I guess she's like half and half. But tradition and the role of Donis's own heritage plays an extremely relevant point and part of this book. This book really made me look at how much culture I'm seeing in what I'm reading, and I'm realizing that that's not a lot, and that's, I think, a lot. You know, I've been trying to increase my diversity component of what I'm reading, but I think I read a lot of books with white-centric characters written usually by white presenting people, authors, and so this just really drove home the non-white aspects that Donis was experiencing in her day-to-day life. So anywho, summary is Donis is, I think she's like just out of high school. She's like 19. She has been recruited by the FBI to be a confidential informant after witnessing a death. It's actually like a murder-suicide. And the murderer, who then committed suicide, was on drugs, was on meth. And they think it was this kind of meth that had been laced with something, and they, the FBI, think that it was laced with some sort of hallucinogenic mushroom or herb or something that Donis might be able to help them identify, because that person was at least in part native. So she is trying to navigate her life, and she's trying to be a confidential informant, and she kind of realizes that the FBI doesn't necessarily have the community's best interests at heart. They just really want to get to the bottom of this investigation. And so she is trying to help them, but also trying to figure out how to help her friends and her community at the same time. So I thought it was very interesting. There are definitely a lot of content warnings, trigger warnings in this book. There is drug use and abuse and selling, and there's murder and suicide. There's a lot of lies and betrayal. There's sexual assault and discussions around sexual assault. There's like on-page rape. So it's very heavy, but it was very interesting to be in the mind of Donis, because she's young, but she's really smart, and she really is interested in science and chemistry, which is partially why she's recruited by the FBI. So I really loved the amount of the kind of STEM content that was happening. I loved the amount of sort of tradition and incorporation of the research that Donis is doing on Native American medicine and healing and herbs, and the stories she's gathering from her community members, and how that's sort of presented to us as the reader. I did feel as a like mystery that there were plenty of red herrings. I didn't feel that the like twists were particularly twisty. I saw a lot of them coming, but I was enjoying the whole story along the way. So I didn't feel that like it was an amazing mystery that, I mean, I guess it's the kind of perfect amount of mystery, because it was mysterious, but then like you kind of had enough opportunity to figure it out. So you weren't totally in the dark, but also like you hadn't not figured it out. For me, I wanted just a little bit more surrounding the like romance element that was happening. Donis is really interested in one of the other FBI agents who, they kind of strike up a friendship, and then more and more feelings start to develop. And to me, that felt kind of too insta love, especially since he is not being totally truthful and forthcoming to her, because he's playing a part as also undercover. And so I just wanted I wanted the whole romance angle to be done differently. I don't know that it was like unrealistic, since considering both of the main characters' ages, and I'm glad how it didn't, how it kind of ended at the end of the book. That was fine with me. But like, I just was annoyed that they were like so into each other so quickly, but that's a me problem. And also I felt like the on-page sexual assault, I don't want to say it didn't have a purpose, but it kind of didn't really have a purpose in this book, other than to function as pointing out that guy was a bad guy. And like, I felt that the author had kind of already done that and laid that groundwork, and we didn't need that assault to happen for us to know that that guy was a bad guy and or, you know, a high suspect on Donis's list. I also felt that that was used at the end to discuss this topic of assaults that happen in this, you know, in the Native American community. And I felt that that was interesting, but like not necessarily like handled very well throughout the course of this book. It just felt like one more topic that the author was trying to push into this book about, you know, healthcare problems and drug problems and money problems and race problems and fitting in problems. And then it was like, and, you know, drug abuse and also sexual assault problems. And it just was like I think the author was trying to like insert a lot of this. And I'm not saying that that was not part of a demonstrating a well-rounded community that Donis was in, but like it just felt like I got kind of like strong message at the end, and I didn't really feel that that was needed. I don't think I did a very good job explaining that, but whatever. I did really like the book and would highly recommend it. The next book that I finished in October was A Breath of Snow and Ashes. This is by Diana Gabaldon, and this is the 6th book in the Outlander series. This was a reread for me. I have listened to this book before. I listened to this on audiobook, and our characters, it's the 6th book in the series, but basically in this book they're just kind of like settling in to their life together. There's a lot of sort of disjointed events that happen. I was kind of surprised how much I did remember from the previous time I read it. Not necessarily the entire scope of individual events and not their order at all, but I remember certain elements and those came out, so that was good to know. It definitely has a meandering kind of feel for a lot of it, and it is a long book. It's like 900 plus pages. And then in the 3rd act, there's a lot of action. And then the book, in my opinion, ended quite abruptly. The characters have to part ways for a little bit, and I wanted a little bit more emotion happening in those scenes, and I just like didn't get that. So I did like this book. I'm glad I read it. I know that I think that there's going to be content from this book in the future, you know, a next upcoming season of Outlander that's coming out early next year, early 2022. So that's why I kind of wanted to reread this. But yeah, I liked it, and it is a good installment, and I feel like this is one of the stronger, not one of the stronger books, but I'm definitely partway into book 7, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember why I stopped in like the middle of book 7. So this was a good strong one, and I'm struggling in book 7. So the last 2 books that I read in October were both contemporary romances. I read People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I listened to this on audio, and this had been recommended because it was part of the Sugar and Spice book club. I will leave a link up in the cards and down in the description to find out more information about the Sugar and Spice book club, but we are reading romances in that book club. So in this book, I read Beach Read by Emily Henry last year and really loved it. So I had some high anticipation for this book, but didn't feel like that paid off super well, because in this book we follow Poppy and Alex. This is a like slow burn friends to lovers book, and I don't love either of those tropes. They're okay, but like they're kind of in the middle for me. So we follow Poppy and Alex. They met in college and became really, really good friends, and were great friends together during the time that they were able to, you know, bond and be together all the time in college. And then every summer, since the summer they met, they have decided to take, or maybe not since they met, but ever since they became good friends, they decided to take a vacation every summer. And in college and right out of college, those vacations were done very on the cheap, kind of like as sketchily as possible, just to save as much money as possible. But they were always something really fun and something they both really loved and looked forward to every year. And so this book is structured where kind of in alternating chapters, we're seeing present day and this year's vacation, and then also sort of 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 8 years ago, etc. And we know from the start that Poppy and Alex are not speaking. Some drama happened within the last 2 years, I think, on a vacation, and their friendship has fallen apart since then. And so the lead up to the book is in the current present day chapters is them kind of deciding to they reach out to each other and they decide to go on one more vacation this year, even though they haven't talked in 2 years. And we see how that vacation is progressing, and then we also are getting the previous years and sort of seeing the build up over time of their relationship. So for me, like, that was fine. I like when books jump around in time like that, but I felt like I didn't care, like the tension to leading up to like the reveal of like what happened 2 years ago that made them like break up. Like, I didn't really care about that. And also it was predictable. And also I felt like it was pretty stupid. Once it finally was revealed what had happened between them, I was like, really? That's what drove you guys apart for 2 years? And also my frustration with friends to lovers is that it was very clear to me in this book that both of them have been pining after each other and have been in love with each other for literal years. And so it just really annoyed me because I was like, just get together already. Like, I understand that like it was structured so that they couldn't do that because that's how these books, like, and this trope works. But like, that's my major frustration with this trope, is that they should be together because they've usually been mutually pining for each other. So that's my frustration. And I don't know. I also felt like there was, because we only get to see these times in their lives when they're together on vacations, it felt like nothing of importance happened not on those vacations. So it just felt like, I don't know, I felt like that could have been handled a little bit differently. And altogether, I just didn't really appreciate the third act drama and the reason they had to figure things out. I felt like that was annoying to me. Like, yes, it sort of wasn't the mature way to do things, but I was very frustrated with this book as it went along. And so I just ended up not really enjoying it, and it was kind of a letdown. And I think it was just mostly because these tropes are not ones that I already like, and then I just was frustrated with the book in and of itself. So it was kind of bleh for me. The last book that I finished in October was The Love Hypothesis. This is by Hazelwood. I think this is a debut book, but definitely has tropes that I like better in this book. In this book, we follow Olive, who is getting her PhD, and she kind of very suddenly starts, she jumps onto a guy walking in the hallway and she kisses him, and it's because reasons, and then they agree to start fake dating. And this guy that she randomly like grabs in the hallway is actually a professor, and his name is Adam. And he's not her professor, but Olive and Adam agree to start this fake dating relationship, the premise of which is very weak, but hey, whatever. It often is in this fake dating trope. But they start fake dating. They are both very busy and scientists, and there's a lot of like math and STEM and genetics in this book, which was awesome to see. And then over the course of the book, she starts developing feelings. We only ever get to see Olive's point of view. I love dual point of view books, so I really wish we would have gotten a chance to see that because Adam was an interesting character. One of my frustrations was that Adam, did I say Alex? Adam is a character that is known to be very strict, very stern, kind of a hard ass. And so lots of students are afraid of him and find him very abrasive. And so we're constantly told throughout this book, Olive keeps like thinking and knowing that like everyone hates this guy, but we never really get to see very much of that. Like the closest we ever get to that is when he's just kind of being more direct and straightforward. And so I just didn't feel that there was enough there for me to really like believe that Adam was supposedly this big jerk. But also there is some sexual harassment that happens in this book, and I felt that was handled really well. Not actually by Olive, because I was frustrated when Olive didn't want to take stronger action when that happened, but I really appreciated that she had a great support group, and Adam comes through for her in this moment, and I thought that was done really well. And also I thought it was very interesting to have that portrayed in this book where there this is true to life, in that it's not heard of for people of power to take advantage of people who are under them. And, you know, it was very telling that you know, it's good to know that like this happens even when everyone is like super well educated and, you know, kind of in this supportive setting after all. So yeah, for me, I wanted a little bit more time of Adam and Olive together, because I felt like she was saying, oh, I realize I have very strong feelings for him. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys have only met for coffee like 5 times. So like, can you be in love with him that quick? But so I wanted a little bit more from the romance, but overall I did thoroughly enjoy it. I thought it was steamy. I think I would have liked it a little bit better if it was dual point of view, as I said, but I quite enjoyed it and am looking forward to more by Ellie Hazelwood. So there you have it. Those are the 8 books that I managed to finish in October. And if you have read any of these, I would love to hear your opinions. I definitely have strong opinions about these. I didn't realize that was quite the case until I was kind of putting together this list and recording this video. But if you have opinions on anything that I talked about, please leave those down in the comments. I would love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!